stuck? Is something holding you back? Are there obstacles in your way? Well, let's smash through those obstacles so that you can live your best life. Hi, I'm Matt Brooks, founder of Matt Brooks Coaching, and I'm fascinated with how people overcome barriers and achieve success. Join me for insights, strategies, and inspiring stories as we explore practical tips and powerful tools to unlock your full potential. This is the Barrier Busting Podcast. Well, welcome everybody to the very first episode of the Barrier Busting Podcast. My name's Matt Brooks. I'm a certified professional life coach. I work in private practice, and I work with individuals and professionals who are, looking to overcome obstacles or gain more clarity in their lives. My practice is exclusively online, and you can learn more by visiting www.mattbrookscoaching.com. Check it out, and you'll find that you can even click on to set yourself up with a free discovery Zoom session with me. Now, I want to talk about habits today, but before I get into it, because this is a new podcast, I just want to kind of give you an idea of what I'm hoping to achieve, what I'm hoping this will accomplish, okay? As I stated in my introduction, I plan to use this as a forum to present insights, strategies, inspiring stories, along with practical tips and powerful tools for unlocking our potential in our never-ending quest for living our best lives. Now, just a couple words about the format I intend to do. You know, a lot of podcasts out there go for like an hour and a half, 40 minutes. And I'll admit, I had a podcast series at one point where my shows were that long. But, who the hell has time to sit down and listen to an hour and a half, 40-minute podcast? Do you? I don't. I just don't have that kind of time. So I know that what most people do is they'll break it up over several commutes to work or, their workouts at the gym. I'm going to do 30-minute shows. That's my goal, is to do 30 minutes or less. I'm sure I'll blow that at some point, and I'll have a show that goes over like by 10 minutes. But my goal, my hope is to do 30-minute shows for several reasons. First of all, I don't want to inundate anybody with information all in one sitting. I prefer to give you some, like this series I'm about to do is on habits, and I'm not going to do it all in one show because there's so much information about habits. I'm going to split it up over several half-hour shows so that the idea is you get, some information this week you can think about, and then next week you'll get some more to add to that. So you're not feeling like, you're in grad school and you have to get out a pad and write a bunch of notes. Like, I want you to get some ideas every week when you listen, but I don't want to I don't want it to be oppressive, right? So, and the idea also behind 30 minutes is, hopefully you can listen to it on one of your commutes to or from work during the week. Not like have to split it up over like 3 or 4 of your commutes, but hopefully you can just, hear my show in one commute, have that stuff in your mind for the week to think about, and then hear the next episode the following week. So that's the idea, okay? One other thing, though, I want to mention about it is I do plan to have guests, so it's not just going to be me yakking at you. I do plan to have guests, and, I hope to have experts in whatever given field we're talking about. But I want you to know I'm not just planning on having experts as guests. I want to talk to real people because I'm going to be talking about real life challenges. I don't want to just hear from people who think about these and write about these things or do research studies on these things. That's certainly valuable, right? We definitely want that information. But I want to hear from everyday people who've lived these issues. I want to hear from people like, I'm going to do a series at some point on career pivoting. I want to talk to people who've done it, not just the experts who tell you how to do it. I want to talk to people who've lived the issues we're addressing, find out what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and in general, how they moved their lives forward. That's what's most valuable to me and what's most interesting to me. So, yeah, we'll have experts if I can get them, of course, but we're also just going to have regular, everyday folk who can tell us from their own lived experience what we need to know. So that's the plan for this barrier busting podcast. I hope you'll find it interesting and helpful. And I hope if you do, you'll be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, which at the very least will make sure you get notified every time I drop a new episode. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about habits. And as I said, this is just the first of a series of episodes I'm going to do on habits. I think I'm going to do 5 or 6, maybe even 7, depending on the guests that I've got lined up and the other shows that I want to do myself. But today I just want to talk about the basics, all right? Just the basics of habits, what they're about, how they're formed, and all that. Now, there is a ton of information out there about habits, okay? There's books, there's research papers, there's articles, there's podcasts. There is a ton of stuff on habits. So you're asking yourself, why is this joker telling me creating another podcast on habits? What's the point? Well, here's the point to me, and that is that there are certain topics that are so important, so central to our lives, that in my opinion, we can't talk about them enough. We can't keep them on the fore of our conscious mind enough. And that's how powerful a force habits are. Habits are amazingly powerful, and they play a huge role in our lives. And so even though you may know a lot about habits, I think the more we talk about it, the more we keep ourselves aware of it, the more we see how they work in our lives, and we can decide which ones are working for us and which ones are working against us. Habits. Yep. We've all got them, right? In fact, did you know that roughly 40% of your daily actions are done out of habit? That's right. Yours and mine, everybody's, about 40% are done out of habit. How do I know that? Well, researchers at Duke University published a study in 2006, that showed over 40% of our daily actions are not actually due to decisions we make, but instead they're done out of habit. 40%. Now that's a powerful force. Habits aren't just things like, exercising or smoking or overeating. Habits can be anything from small behaviors like what foot you put a shoe on first and what hand you use to squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube, to more complex actions like how you handle your finances, how you shop at the grocery store, how you respond to challenging situations in your life, just to name a few. So what is a habit? What's the definition of a habit? I mean, yeah, we all know what a habit is, right? But what's the actual definition? That's what I wanted to know. So I looked it up. I got onto Merriam-Webster, and I found 2 interesting definitions in there. The first says a habit is an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary. Nearly or completely involuntary. I want you to remember that as we go through this series. The second thing that I found in Merriam-Webster stated that a habit is a behavior pattern acquired by frequent repetition or physiologic exposure that shows itself in regularity or increased facility of performance. Remember frequent repetition along with nearly or completely involuntary. These are keys to understanding what habits actually are. But yeah, we don't really need any formal definition of a habit. We all know what it is, as I said. They're just things we do without thinking about it, right? I mean, we just don't think about it. We just do it. And that actually is the point. We don't think about it. We just do it. And it turns out that that's a good thing, mostly. See, habits serve a purpose, and the purpose is to give our brains a break. They essentially reserve brain space or energy so that we aren't worn out every day, and so we can use our brains for more of the creative and or challenging decisions that we have to make on any given day. Think about it. There is so much minutia in a normal day, right? As powerful a tool as our brains are, they just can't handle making conscious decisions about everything. It would become overloaded and the brain would just shut down, right? So the brain has a kind of built-in fail-safe mechanism, and it's called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is a nub of tissue in the brain, roughly about the size of a golf ball. By the way, for the doctors and scientists out there, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And if I didn't, go ahead and laugh. Feel free. It's okay. I can handle it. But anyways, the basal ganglia is a nub of tissue in the brain about the size of a golf ball that's near the center of your brain, with the primary function of sending signals that control your body's movement. Additionally, as research has shown, the basal ganglia plays a central role in decision making, right? How you weigh risks, rewards, goals, all that. And it processes signals that affect emotion, and motivation. Researchers also found out something, though. The basal ganglia is also command central for habits. It studies and learns our behaviors, stores those behaviors and the rewards from them in our memory, and helps us automate tasks. If any of you have a business with automated technology, even as simple as automated appointment reminders via email or text message to your clients, then you can easily understand this portion of your brain. It's the Human Automation app. It helps us have an efficient brain. Remember, though, and this is the thing you got to remember, as helpful as it is that the brain creates automatic behaviors as, a way to free up mental space, it can also be a double-edged sword. Because you see, the brain does not discriminate between good and bad habits. It knows how to catalog behaviors and make them automatic. And that goes for all behaviors, both good and bad. And that's the rub. I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of information out there regarding habits, right? For this podcast series, much of what I'll be talking about can be found with in-depth discussions in two books in particular, books that I think are just phenomenal. The first one is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and the second is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I cannot recommend these two books enough. They're pretty easy reads, easy to digest the information, very thorough. They go into a lot of in-depth information, and they talk about research, what researchers did with rats, and how they discovered all kinds of things about habits in the brain. So I'm going to be referring to a lot of things from their books. I want to give those two authors the credit they deserve because they really are outstanding books, and I've gotten a lot of my information from them. I've read a lot on habits, but I find those two books in particular to be extraordinary, at least for our purposes here. I just want to mention, though, that, I don't have any ties to these authors. I don't know these guys. I don't have any ties to their publishers. I've got no book deals in the works for myself. I'm just, a guy who's interested in learning, and I found these books were really extraordinary in helping me learn. So that's why I'm talking about it. I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have a discussion of the actual mechanics of how habits are formed. I mean, how a behavior eventually becomes a habit. There is actually a formula to this, and it's something called the habit loop. More on that in just a minute.
Feeling overwhelmed? Struggling to find balance in your daily life? At Matt Brooks Coaching, we get it, and we can help. With over 25 years of nonprofit executive experience and an MSW with a clinical focus, Matt Brooks offers personalized coaching designed to help you rise above your challenges and live your best life. Whether you aim to advance your career, enhance your skills, or simply find more clarity and peace, Matt is here to be your partner and ally. Visit mattbrookscoaching.com to book your free discovery session today. Take the first step towards a brighter tomorrow.
And we're back. All right. As I said, we're going to talk about the actual formula and how, habits are created. And there is a formula. How does a habit form, right? What's the process behind creating a habit? What is the formula? Well, as I said, there is one. It's called the habit loop. Okay. Doesn't matter what you read or hear about habits, you're going to find this referred to in pretty much everything. But Charles Duhigg really does a phenomenal job talking about this at length in his book, The Power of Habit. I really credit him with being so thorough and in-depth about it. And I would encourage you to read his book because you're going to get much more information than what I'll be giving you. But the habit loop is essentially the blueprint, right? It's the blueprint for creating a habit, and that blueprint is the same for all of us. It's got 4 components to it, okay? First, there's a cue. It's a trigger of some sort. That pushes us to number 2, the second part, which is the creation of a craving. So we have a cue and then a craving. The craving pushes us to number 3, which is a routine. The craving generates a routine, and the routine is what we do to satisfy the craving. And that brings us to the 4th element, which is the reward, the satisfaction of our craving. So again, the habit loop has 4 parts. There's a cue, there's a craving, there's a reward. I'm sorry, I blew that already. There's a cue, there's a craving, there's a routine, and then there's a reward. Here's an example. You see the donut. You crave the sugar. You eat the donut, you get a sugar high. That's a perfect example of the loop. The cue is the donut, the craving is you crave sugar, the routine is the eating of the donut, the reward is that sugar high, right? That's the general idea. But let's look a little more closely at each one of these 4 components. And remember, by the way, that our brains record this loop. With repetition, our brains will make this process automatic so that we won't think about it in the future. We'll see the donut, we won't even think about the craving. It just becomes automatic. That's why, bad habits can be so tough to break. And we're going to be talking about that in an episode, a future episode coming shortly. But right now, we just want to go over this basic formula. So let's look a little more closely at these 4 components. The cue. As I said, the cue is a trigger, and this trigger fires up that automated app in your brain called the basal ganglia. It's how you just automatically act in certain situations, okay? It's how you know what shoe to put on first or how to fasten your seatbelt, right? You might walk by a water fountain or see an ad for your favorite soda, which cues thirst. Or, if you're like me, simply waking up in the morning is a cue to immediately make a pot of coffee, all right? Now, while the habit loop applies to all of us, what's interesting is where we differ, and that's in terms of cues. We all have different cues. Cues come in many forms, and they are as unique to each of us as we are as unique individuals. Cues can be almost anything, and one person's cue might mean nothing to another person, okay? So like in Atomic Habits by James Clear, he gives the best example of this, I think. I'm sure I could have come up with something better, but I think this is such a great example. I'm gonna just use him for this. And that's that a gambler, say you're a gambler, you hear the sound of slot machines, that can immediately create a craving, okay? But to a non-gambler, that sound of slot machines might just be background noise and mean nothing at all. I mean, that's why cues are unique to all of us and the situations we're in. The main thing to remember, though, is that the cue anticipates the reward. And that anticipation creates the second stage of the habit loop, which is the craving. This is when your brain starts expecting the reward. And the craving, is what drives habits. Without a craving, no habit will exist. Understand, however, that the word craving doesn't just refer to a physical craving like sugar or nicotine or caffeine. A craving can be many things like success, financial stability, losing weight, or even just a better short game on the golf course. Think about it. You drive by McDonald's and you begin to crave French fries, or you smell food being cooked and you crave eating. The cue generates the craving, and the craving pushes the habit loop. It's the driving force behind all of this. And that brings us to the routine, all right? The routine is the work that leads to obtaining the reward, the work we do to satisfy the craving, okay? This can also be anything, ranging from the physical, like working out, to the mental, like meditating, to the emotional, like eating when you feel depressed, right? Feel depressed, grab some comfort food, right? Feel overweight, go to the gym and work out, right? Whatever you crave, you will develop a routine to satisfy that craving. And whatever the routine is, it's the routine that brings us what we're seeking, that final stage of the loop, the reward. The reward is the ultimate goal. It's the finish line. It's satisfaction, right? That's what we want. I can't get no satisfaction. Well, develop a habit, and you will. The brain keeps a record of all this. This is the key to remember. The brain keeps a record of all this, the entire pattern, so that the next time the cue presents itself, our brains go into a kind of cruise control. That automated pattern is activated, and we go through the stages of this habit loop. So habits serve a purpose, right? They save our brains from overworking, and that is a good thing. But as I mentioned before, remember, it's always a double-edged sword because it can automate destructive habits as well. It does automate destructive habits as well. And like I said, I'll be talking a lot more about that in a future episode. Here's another thing to think about, though. The craving and the reward may not always be what they seem on the surface. There might be something deeper and hidden even from your conscious mind going on. And this, by the way, is where a life coach can really come in handy to help you unlock those deeper motives behind cravings and rewards. What do I mean by this? Okay. Remember the donut example, right? The cue's the donut, cravings the sugar, routines eat the donut, reward is get the sugar high. Let's use that same example. But let's use it to show an example of how that craving and reward can be something deeper. On the surface, it may seem like sugar, craving a sugar high, but there might be something else going on there, okay? Cue and the routine are going to stay the same. It's the craving and the reward that are going to change. So the cue's the donut. What's the craving? Well, the craving is defiance. It could be. I'm saying it's not definitely, but it could be. Could be defiance. Why defiance? Because everybody's always telling you can't eat donuts. The donuts are bad for you. Don't eat the donuts. They're going to make you fat. Don't eat the donuts. Well, you're an individual. You're like, don't tell me what I can't do. So you have a defiant side to you. And then don't lie, everybody. We all got this somewhere in our lives. We've done this. Let's be honest, all right? The cue is the donut. The craving is the defiance of you can't tell me what I can't do. So then you go to the routine. You eat the donut, and then you get your reward, that feeling that you won, man, that you got your way, that you succeeded in being defiant, right? You can't tell me nothing. I'm going to do what I want to do. That's the thing. Sometimes that craving and that reward are really coming from someplace much deeper. And again, I'm not just saying this because I'm a life coach, but this is really a great topic to work on with a coach because this is something we work with, is what's underneath our actions. Get the idea? All right. Well, look, that's enough for today, part one of my series on habits. As I said, I wanted to keep these under 30 minutes, and I can see that I'm actually going to succeed in that and be even a little short on that, which is great. I just want you to think about this habit loop, and then next week, I'm going to come back with more information. We're going to talk about how to build good habits next time, and the 4 laws of behavior change, which are pretty interesting. We're also going to talk about something called a keystone habit, which works to generate more good habits. Yes, creating a habit, a good habit, can create more good habits, can spawn more good habits. And of course, the same thing can happen with bad habits. You create a solid bad habit, man, and it can create a spiral of other bad habits. We're going to talk about that next week, and the 4 laws of behavioral change and how to build good habits in our next episode. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified when I drop new episodes, and it'll help me build an audience, which I'm so craving to do. I'm craving it. Thank you for joining us again and for listening, and I will catch you next time on the Barrier Busting Podcast.